Chapter 6. The Islams. The Polygamous Solution in Arabia. By definition, Islam means the Muslim religion, a monotheistic religion in which the supreme deity is Allah and the chief prophet and founder is Muhammad. Webster's New World Ic. 1984 ed. Page 747. Muhammad was born in Arabia and lived from 570 to 632 BC. Most Muslims feel, however, that the beginnings of their religion actually went back further than that. They claim it is the restoration of the original religion of Abraham. The terms Islam, Muslim, and Mohammedan are used somewhat interchangeably. Map of Arabia. Islam means submission to the will of God, also submission to their prophet, Muhammad, and to the Quran. The Muslims consider the Quran as containing the very words of God himself, and they are extremely careful to preserve its content. There is probably no other book in history, including the Bible, that has been so much studied or commented upon as the Quran, states the Encyclopedia Americana, 1995 ed. 15494. So it is most interesting that within this Mohammedan Bible that these people hold so sacred are instructions for living plural marriage, i.e., sample from Quran. The translation of this verse reads, "If you fear that you shall not be able to deal justly with the orphans, marry women of your choice, 2 or 3 or 4, but if you fear that you shall not be able to deal justly with them, then marry only one." Quran 4:3. And later from the same book, "And they ask for your instructions concerning women. Say, God does instruct you about them. And remember what has been rehearsed to you in the book concerning the orphan women to whom you give not the portions prescribed, and yet whom you desire to marry, as also concerning the children who are weak and depressed, that you stand firm for justice to orphans. There is not a good deed you do, but Allah is well aware of it." Holy Quran 4:127. The lauded Shabazz explains this verse by saying, "Orphans does not merely mean those who have lost their parents. In Quranic terminology, it means those who have lost shelter, protection, etc., those deprived by death of one's spouse, the impoverished, etc. Polygamy, a remedy or a right in al-Islam." Shabazz, page 10. When Muhammad was 25, he married Khadija, 15 years his senior, and for the next 25 years he was not inclined to a plural marriage, even though he had been offered beautiful women and riches by the Meccans to desist from his missionary activities. His small band went into 5 battles during and after which he saw the devastation to families resulting from war. It was after the Battle of Uhud that the men were allowed to take plural wives, solely for a remedy to the sorrowful plight of widows and their family. The revelation on polygamy was revealed after the Battle of Uhud, in which many Muslims were killed, leaving widows and orphans for whom due care was incumbent upon the Muslim survivors. Islam and Focus, Abd al-Hadi Hamuda, page 103. In such situations, polygamy is more of a solution to a serious problem than an exploitation of women by sensual men. Fida Hussein wrote that monogamy is the food which sustains society, polygamy is the medicine of the disease of a monogamous society. Wives of the Prophet, Hussein, page 71, and Shabazz makes this interesting observation. It is obvious that if a man married in such an abnormal situation, e.g. the situation created by the consequences of the Battle of Uhud, etc., it will be a service to the nation, both on his part and the part of his first wife. A good Muslim sister, who is married, would consider it her duty to provide shelter to one of her unfortunate sisters who has been driven to such a pitiable condition through no fault of her own. Polygamy, a remedy or a right. Shabazz, page 15. In earlier times many Arabs, including those who became Muslims, took great numbers of wives and treated them very badly. Then came a restriction upon the number of wives permitted, probably to make the men appreciate their wives more. Fida Hussein said, after the restrictive injunction, the Muslims retained 4 wives and discarded the surplus for better protection and their rights. Wives of the Prophet, page 69, there was a recognition of certain wrongs in the living of polygamy, but there were greater wrongs in the system of monogamy. Some of the purposes for plural marriage are more clearly seen among the heathen nations than among those that claim to be so enlightened. Many of the Islamic people show more genuine consideration and respect for women than do those in our own American Christian nation. Aladdin Shabazz wrote, "The study of Islamic history reveals that polygamy came into existence simply to save the women from destruction. Prophet Muhammad's marriages were motivated by a de facto humanitarian spirit, not sensual motive. His marriages to some showed the policy of conciliating the hands of rival factions, etc., etc. Unmarried females unprovided for, widowed women generally with children, destituted females, in general, etc., engendered a delicate situation for Prophet Muhammad and other concerned Muslims. The problem was more than economics. They should be protected and their other human needs looked after and fulfilled. It is the duty of society to handle this delicate situation, protecting the individual dignity of those affected, as well as the moral fabric of the society. In light of these facts, it is suggested ambiguously in the Quran a feasible alternative by relaxing the rule of monogamy. Polygamy, a remedy or a right, Shabazz, pages 14 to 15. The Islamic and other religious societies have found that in various tribes and cultures, polygamy becomes a social and economic necessity, and many of these women not only accept polygamy, but even prefer it. During the first 7 centuries AD, the Persians continued to be better gentlemen than the Greeks, and prostitution was less frequent among them than among the Greeks. Rabbi Gamaliel praised the Persians especially for 2 qualities. They are temperate in eating, modest in the privy and in marital relations. Polygamy was also allowed and was recommended in cases where the first wife proved barren. Persian women were exceptionally beautiful. And it is the women who yearn and take the initiative in courtship and seduction. Feminine charms overcame masculine laws. Story of Civilization, Durant, 4:137. The girls often wed between the ages of 12 and 14, and the boys as early as 15. The groom was rarely allowed to see the face of his bride before marriage, and the wedding never required a priest. Polygamy among the Islams was usually confined to the rich, and concubines were permitted. Polygamous women were mostly content because of their offspring. Their family was a large blending of women and children. Dr. Jamal A. Badawi describes the meaning of plural marriage as outlined in Islam's law. The requirement of justice rules out the fantasy that man can own as many as he pleases. It also rules out the concept of secondary wife, for all wives have exactly the same status and are entitled to identical rights and claims over their husband. It also implies, according to the Islamic law, that should the husband fail to provide enough support for any of his wives, she can go to the court and ask for a divorce. The verse says marry not kidnap, buy, or seduce. What is marriage as understood in Islam? Marriage in Islam is a civil contract which is not valid unless both contracting parties consent to it. Thus no wife can be forced or given to a husband who is already married. It is thus a free choice of both parties. As to the first wife, A. She may be barren or ill, and C. In polygamy a better solution than divorce. B. She may divorce him unilaterally if he is married to a second wife, provided that the nuptial contract gives her the right of unilateral divorce, isma. C. She can go to court and ask for a divorce if there is evidence of mistreatment or injustice inflicted upon her. Polygamy in Islamic Law, Badawi, pages 6 to 7. The Muslim male was allowed to marry a Jewish or Christian woman, but not an idolatress. Muhammad accepted polygamy to better balance the community because of the high male mortality rate during wartime. It was an obligation for a man to have children, and each man could have 4 wives, but Muhammad himself was allowed to exceed that rule. Divorce was much less difficult for the woman than the man to obtain, according to the Quran or the Talmud. It was written that the wife should recognize the authority of the male, and she must obey her husband. Every woman who doeth and her husband is pleased with her shall enter paradise. Quran 4:35. Muhammad sometimes quarreled with his wives, but he was usually very pleased and spoke highly of them. He once said the most valuable thing in the world is a virtuous woman, also that men should be reminded that their mothers carried them with pain, brought them forth with pain, and nursed them for months, which is one of the reasons he felt that paradise is at the foot of the mothers. Muhammad claimed to have a revelation in which he saw paradise, where blessed males would have many wives. The historian, Will Durant, obtained a copy of this manifestation. It is one vast garden, watered with pleasant rivers and shaded with spreading trees. The blessed there will be dressed in silk brocades, and be adorned with gems. They will recline on couches, be served by handsome youths, and eat fruit from trees bowing down to fill their hands. By the mercy of Allah there will be no speeches at these heavenly banquets. Instead there will be virgins never yet touched by man or jinn, in beauty like the jacinth and coral stone, with swelling bosoms but modest gaze, with eyes as fair and pure as sheltered eggs, and bodies free from the imperfections and indignities of mortal flesh. Each blessed male will have 72 of these for his reward, and neither age nor weariness nor death shall mar the loveliness of these maidens, or their comrades' bliss. Since pious and believing women will also enter paradise, some confusion might result, but such difficulties would not be insuperable to men accustomed to polygamy. and round about them shall go children, never growing old. The Story of Civilization, Durant, 4:179. Durant then added, who could reject such a revelation? The law of Islam was further clarified by Dr. Jamal Badawi. It is now evident that the association of polygamy with Islam is not only unfair or biased, but based on serious misunderstanding. Polygamy was practiced, often without limitations, in almost all cultures. It was sanctioned by various religions and practiced both before Islam and for many centuries thereafter. It is both honest and accurate to say that it is Islam which regulated this practice, limited it, made it more humane, and instituted equal rights and status for all wives. What the Quranic decrees amount to, taken together, is a discouragement of polygamy, unless necessity for it exists. It is also evident that the general rule in Islam is monogamy and not polygamy. However, permission to practice limited polygamy is only consistent with Islam's realistic view of the nature of man and woman, and of the various social needs, problems, and cultural variations. The question is, however, far more than the inherent flexibility of Islam, it also is the frank and straightforward approach of Islam in dealing with practical problems. Rather than requiring hypocritical and superficial compliance, Islam delves deeper into the problems of individuals and societies, and provides for legitimate and clean solutions, which are far more beneficial than would be the case if they were ignored. There is no doubt that the second wife legally married and treated kindly is better off than a mistress without any legal rights or security. This vitality, flexibility, and farsightedness of the teachings of Islam cannot possibly be attributed to any man or group of men, including Prophet Muhammad, P. himself. Its secret simply lies in its divine source, God Most High, who knows in entirety what human needs and problems are. Polygamy in Islamic Law, Badawi, pages 10 to 11. The Quran itemizes a set of marriage conditions or rules for the purpose of making a righteous union between a couple. 1. Prohibitions to marriage. These are nearly the same as in the Old Testament: mothers, daughters, sisters, etc. 2. Deal justly with all wives. There are different stipulations between permanent and temporary contracts, which may be similar to wives and concubines. 3. Mutual love and compassion in the union. These include peace, tranquility, and sharing sorrows and joys with each other. Shacking up does not embrace these. 4. Multiplication of the human race. Both are responsible for this divine object of bearing children and their welfare. 5. Children have the right to inherit properties of deceased parents and relatives. Thus children should be the rightful heir of inheritance. These rules are similar to those in the Mosaic Code, and are reasonable enough to promote a good marriage in or out of plural marriage. And from another source, Islam permits him 4 legal wives on earth, which Christianity has not yet got around to doing. Islam gains strongly by reason of the rivalry between various Christian sects. Pagans see the spectacle of Protestant and Catholic missionaries competing in the same area, and do not understand how this harmonizes with the principle of a universal Christian God. Inside Africa, John Gunther, page 64. The anti-polygamy governments in some Islam areas have put a great deal of pressure on the Muslims through their Christian laws. Until today, the practice is highly discouraged in many Muslim nations. Polygyny is still prevalent in some Muslim nations. The Quran, the Bible of Islam, officially permits the Muslim man to take 4 wives. Although polygamy has been practiced widely throughout Islam, Western mores have had their effect on Muslim society, and many Muslims consider plural marriages a sign of cultural backwardness. Consequently, polygyny is now banned or at least discouraged in several Muslim nations. Encyclopedia Americana, 1995 ed. 22,365. Most of the modern Christian nations are not interested in solving the problems of surplus women by restoring plural marriage. They are more concerned about gaining converts from each other and subjecting them to their priestcrafts. They are more interested in power and money than in the miseries of widows and unmarried women. Dr. Jamal Badawi observed, both unmarried women and widows are human beings with needs. Unless their instinctive needs are legitimately satisfied, the temptation is great for corruption and immorality. Polygamy in Islamic Law, Badawi, page 5. The percentage of polygamists in Arabia and other countries is usually quite small, as there are only so many surplus women, and there are too many men who want to take on that additional responsibility. Gian Sadat wrote, all over the Arab world the taking of multiple wives was the exception rather than the rule. In Egypt, polygamy was practiced by only 3% of the population. In Tunisia, polygamy has been banned since 1963. A Woman of Egypt, Sadat, page 28. How strange that when there are only 3% of the population living plural marriage, they must make laws against such a small minority. It is evident that both Talmudic and Mohammedan laws were mostly man-made, as many statements were quite humorous, and God could not have originated them. They blamed Eve for her intelligent curiosity, but gave her credit for an instinctive wisdom missing in man. They said that when 10 measures of speech were given to the world, women took 9, the men 1. They requested that women beautify herself for her husband rather than for other men. Also, a woman's place was in the home, but their earnings and property belonged to the husband. It seemed that gossip was common, and one rabbi said, 100 women are equal to only one witness. The value of a good woman was that no man is so rich as a wife noted for her good deeds, and all the blessings of a household come through the wife. On the other hand, it was said that a man who has a bad wife will never see the face of hell. However, let men beware of causing women to weep, God counts their tears. See the story of civilization, Will Durant, 4:363. Islamic teachings forbid illicit sexual relations, which is punishable by severe measures, even capital punishment on occasion, so they have reduced modern Christian corruptions of sexual sin from their society. Furthermore, the people's free choice between monogamy and polygamy has solved some of these problems. To sum up, Islam being against immorality, hypocritical pretense of morality, and against divorce unless no better solution is available, provides for a better alternative which is consistent with human nature and with the preservation of pure and legitimate sex relationships. In a situation like this, it is doubtful that any solution would be better than polygamy, which is, after all, an optional solution. Polygamy in Islamic Law, Badawi, page 8. The modern corruptions in our American system are noticed and disliked by these backward nations. The more recent lifestyle of live-in marriages appear to be abominable to most of them, but Shabazz explains how this corruption has spread to their country. Mutta may be likened somewhat to the immoral trial marriage, as practiced in America, etc., live-in arrangement of modern times. When viewed in the light of the Holy Quran, Mutta is shown up to be exactly the same as living in a state of zina, adultery, a state where the man is interested only in satisfying his animal lust, male ego, etc., throwing overboard all of the principles of permanent conjugal values as enjoined by Allah Ta'ala. Today, Allah aids us to see the evil in this. A man enters in a mutta contract with a woman for a month. When the month ends, he leaves. He came and went. Another man comes along and commits mutta with the same woman for 3 weeks. At the end of the 3 weeks, the man goes his way. Along comes a third man and a fourth man, all mudded and no permanence. Men just come and go, come and go, come and go, etc., etc. If this is not legalized prostitution, then what is it? Marriage is no come and go game. Mutta, in contradistinction, has a built-in mechanism that gives a man the freedom and the license to degrade, debase, and humiliate a member of the oppressed, much maligned sex further, under the travesty and pretext of marrying her for a period of time. No self-respecting woman would submit to such. Polygamy, a remedy or a right. Shabazz, pages 41 to 42. Unfortunately, America holds up no enviable moral standard for Arabia or other nations to pattern after. Wife swapping is still very voguish in certain areas in America. Shacking up is in vogue. Trying to Love Too was the title of a song a few years ago, and As We Lay, by Shirley Murdoch, is a more recent one, both speaking about infidelity of husbands and wives. These types of symbiosis are more preferable to the sanctimonious than a divinely structured and regulated polygamous relationship as outlined in the Holy Quran. These are the if loving you is wrong, I don't want to be right ethos. Today, sex is a synonym for love. Polygamy, a remedy or a right. Shabazz, page 4. The Islamic people have tried to avoid some of the problems and crimes that befall our courts every day and the effect they have on society. Rape is a sordid act conducted by a demented, mentally deranged person and is common in the United States. Some psychologists say more people are emotionally disturbed today than at any other time of human history. Many hospitals' psychopathic wards are crowded, and the most popular psychologists today are the psychoanalysts. All this attests to the U.S. being a sick society. Some would even claim that it is terminally ill. Ibid, page 53. Most Muslims see our law system as foolish nonsense because so many criminals have a glib lawyer that can secure freedom by a technicality. Here prostitution, rape and adultery are only winked at, but to Islams they are very serious crimes. They say, There is an overall increase in the crime rate in the country, making the society more unfit to live in and bringing it closer towards an ultimate catastrophic end. Christianity can't handle the ills of society, that is evident. The Islamic approach to the problem of rape is both comprehensive and organized. Firstly, it identifies the root cause of the problem. Secondly, it seeks to isolate the factors contributing to its growth and existence. And thirdly, it proceeds to eliminate the problem in its entirety. Ibid. Page 58. When they eliminate the problem in its entirety, they mean to remove the offending part or the offender himself from society in entirety. Tradition states that Muhammad thought the three most important things in this world were women, fragrant odors, and prayers. Durant says, some of Muhammad's marriages were acts of kindness to the destitute widows of followers or friends, and some were diplomatic marriages to win an enemy. His crowded harem troubled him with quarrels, jealousies, and demands for pin money. He refused to indulge the extravagance of his wives, but he promised them paradise. Women and power were his only indulgence, for the rest he was a man of unassuming simplicity. The Story of Civilization, 472. Muhammad was a simple man that would ask no services of a slave that he had time and strength to do for himself. Despite all the wealth taken in booty and revenue, he spent little upon his family and less upon himself. He ate simple, which was quite common, such as dates, barley bread, milk and honey. He did enjoy beer and wine. He was vain and spent considerable time on his personal appearance. He perfumed his body, painted his eyes, and dyed his hair. In character he was nervous and sometimes subject to periods of melancholy. He was an unscrupulous warrior but a very just judge. At the age of 59 his health began to fail, and he often had fevers. On June 7, 632 AD, after a long period of suffering, he passed on to his paradise. Durant said, if we judge greatness by influence, he was one of the giants of history. Ibid. Page 174. When Muhammad was born, Arabia was a desert filled with rough idolatrous tribes, but at his death it was a nation. He supplanted superstition with a religion based upon Judaism and Zoroastrianism. It created a people of ruthless courage and racial pride that won hundreds of victories. Even today Arabia is a nation of power and influence throughout the world.